me. I'm all the way up. All the way up. I'm all the way up. I'm all the way up.
Good morning. Welcome to the Money Matrix podcast, where smart money finds a smarter way. We are now official. We have a plant and we have a sign and we have a guest.
I guess
you
it makes
wanna-
this a real podcast.
That's amazing, right?
Would you want to introduce us?
Yes.
I'm Ronan Fishman,
Our resident Canadian.
sir.
Alan Hastings.
And yourself?
I'm Irene Yoffe, a realtor in Canada. My partner, Lena, is currently in Florida, and I'm on my way to relocate to Florida as well.
All right. So that's a very good starting point. Before we get into the specifics of business, why are you relocating?
The policies, the government, the country, the real estate cost, the carrying cost, and I can continue on and on. Best advantage is the weather.
So you talk about carrying cost policies. We don't want to get political because everybody has their own political views. But how do you see that they have impacted you negatively directly that has driven you to move south of the border? And then I really want to know why you chose Florida.
Of course. So I find that it's not only myself, it's the people that I work. I've been in real estate for many, many years, and I find the opportunities to acquire properties or to actually pay for those properties are very difficult. Canada opened its borders to mass immigration, and unfortunately, not everybody can afford living here. So Florida, I find it's more opportunities for my clients, which are mainly investors. It gets a better ROI on their investment. To even receive money from the bank as a lender, it's much easier to get financing in Florida, not as in Canada. So I just find there is a lot of issues and problems and delays just on the basic, just to get money, buy a property, and pay for those costs monthly.
Right. So that's the thing I tell people a lot, that to me, as somebody who's been in the real estate and financing space my entire adult life, I realized that the psychology of lenders cross border is very different. In Canada, when you sit through an application, they're looking for reasons why not to give you money. And here, it's completely inverse. Even if something gets denied, it goes through the committee to find out why.
Well, that's just with us.
Yeah,
Of course. Not every bank is like that. But let me ask you something. You said it's unaffordable real estate rents. So what are people doing? What does the market look for you now? Are you just sitting there with nothing to do, or is it really challenging to grind it out?
I have noticed that this past year, the prices have dropped significantly, and I'm talking about good 20%. A lot of also of my clients are looking to move to different areas. So there's branching out to areas that are not as developed and not as populated. But then we have issues with schools and the community and other situations. I also find that clients right now are looking for properties that they can rent their basements out, for example, to generate additional income. So that's also a solution for some of my clients.
So you are still busy, but not like it was before, and you feel like it's not sustainable.
It's very slow to move properties right now. I find a lot of people trying to leave the country or relocate based on the mortgage rates. It's very expensive. A lot of properties are sitting on the market for a long time. In Canada, to have a property sitting for 60 or 90 days on the market is not common. Usually houses here, turnover is much quicker. Now we see a very, very slow turnover. Also with condos. Condos are just flat. Nothing is moving. There is a lot of buildings that cannot close. All the pre-construction is struggling. So for the condo market...
Is that homes that are being priced wrong, or is that just because there's no demand?
No, it's because you cannot take a loan from the bank to afford it. So
Okay.
affordability.
So this is why, we joined forces, and Irina's been really good in, picking our brain and trying to get deals done. I call it 10 years in Canada when it was what acquisitions was like. Ironically, people want the dip and they want to wait the time of market and they want to buy it when it's on the low. This is as bad as it's been in 20 years in the real estate. Access to financing was always a challenge, but what you have underlying, bubbling in the surface is what's causing all these people to move. is there's no consumer confidence. There's no hope for the long run. And even though they're buying less, their carrying costs are higher because of interest rates, and access to capital is very limited. And the Canadian banking landscape is a very small community that if you're going to CIBC, TD, or RBC, you're getting the same product. There's no real differentiation in the solution.
Question for you, and Irina too. You're talking about interest rates. Interest rates in Canada are 4%. So it can't be the interest rates. It's got to be the price of the home or what they're trying to accomplish, because rates here are higher, and affordability, according to you guys, no one would be able to buy here. So
you hit the nail right on the head. It's the underlying sentiment. And she's on the ground there. She'll tell you that people have kind of lost what they were referring to as the value. The value is lacking. They don't see why they should be spending this kind of money. You're seeing a massive influx yourself. We had 50 people on the call that are all inquiring about moving. And it's not just dollar for dollar impact of affordability and inflation. It's the sentiment on the ground. And you can't help but get political about it. When you have people working towards something and they have hope and they can see a future, no problem. I'll spend for it. It makes sense. But when you start seeing that, what am I spending all this tax revenue for? Why am I spending on a home that I don't necessarily want to live in? And you couple that with the market being so depressed across the board. Most people felt confident because they had so much equity in their properties. And they saw that it kept moving forward. Am I saying that accurately?
You are, but I would like to add something. The interest rate might be 4% right now, but the stress test is much higher. So they're not only looking, okay, how much you're making, this is the interest, can you afford it monthly? People also have to come up with a lot of money, which Florida not necessarily has, which is the land transfer tax. Toronto is double. Also, you have investment properties, you pay again taxes, capital gain. So people, again, do not want to versatile their portfolio. They don't want to buy more properties in Canada because at the end of it, the amount of taxes and the carrying cost and the landlord and tenant board, which is also a problem on its own, I find, it's not lucrative enough. You actually might lose money instead of making money. So a lot of people are looking at Florida because, first of all, the Airbnb prices there are high. It's a vacation, tourism, weather. It's very attractive. The cost of those houses are still cheaper, even though with the conversion to Canadian and US, it's at least a secured market.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, even with that, I was just going to ask that, even with that conversion, it's still for them financially makes sense. It gives them a stability factor too, also, that they know that they're not throwing their money into a pit and not knowing what's going to happen. People with equity, can they even access the equity, or it's still so hard to do like a cash out refinance?
They can refinance. I had a situation that even the refinancing was a challenge because the bank wants to review all the documents from start. It's not just the equity of the house and they take money out. You need to resubmit basically all of your income, everything. I had a client that wanted to refinance and buy a vacation home in Florida, and they were not able to.
Still have to qualify the same way. So I understand that.
But you'll look at bank statements.
Yeah.
Yeah. There they'll look at your payroll. There's a big difference. And then there's a tax implication when you're taking that down as personal cash. And if you're looking at bank statement loans, now you're looking at rates significantly higher. It's almost a commercial loan. Now, there's a lot to unpack of what she said there. So do you know what the stress test is?
Please share.
Stress test is really unique. It was put into place about 10 years to cool the real estate market. So let's say interest rates on a 2 to 3 year lock, 25-year, 30-year AM. At that time, variable, you could have been in around 1.5%, maybe 2%. But the banks made you qualify at 5.5%, regardless of what the actual rate that you were going to pay.
Was that just an arbitrary number, 5.5%?
Correct. They did that because there was a spread. I think it was like 300 basis points, but it didn't stay static. It stayed the same as rates fluctuated. But you're now qualifying for a rate because they were afraid that rates are going to start shooting up. Nobody can actually qualify for their property. That stress test stayed in place. So even though you're qualifying for 3-year or 5-year locks right now in Canada at 4.5%, you still really need to qualify 5.5, even though your actual is 4.5. And that was a measure to put in to take the steam out of the real estate market. And there was a year where it hit hard.
That's the same way here in the U.S. If you're qualifying on a primary residence or a second home interest only, you actually have to qualify on the fully amortized payment as if you were paying the principal and
But
interest.
what's the basis point spread between the qualification?
Well, it would be on the interest only, it would just be the difference on the principal and interest. Now, if you have an adjustable mortgage, you would have to qualify on the max rate based on where it could adjust to. So typically it's 225, right? So the
Explain
max
that, because Canadians don't understand what an ARM is.
adjustable rate mortgage is a mortgage that's fixed for a period of time and then it adjusts. And there are different caps, and the caps are based on how many times it could move a year and what percentage it could move a year, and then the total for the life of the loan. The average is at 225, where it can move twice in 1 year for a max of 2% and a total max of 5% for the life of the loan.
So it's set a hard cap at the
So
top.
you're qualifying on an adjustable at whatever your rate is today plus the 5% max in a lot of cases.
I would love to add something about that, which I think is very important also to understand. In Canada, you never know how much you're going to pay in the future. Every 3 years, based on the change of rates, your monthly payments can change. What I love about Florida, when the rates were very low at 1 or 2%, you lock it for 30 years. You know the same amount for 30 years until you pay it out. And again, because we are in the era of technology, AI is significantly in reducing workload. A lot of people right now also struggling to find a job. So they don't know how can I afford to buy a house today, which an average townhouse is starting from $1 million. We're not even talking about luxury homes.
And $1 million is a recent phenomenon. There in the neighborhood where I did most of my business and she lived, 1.5 would have 17 offers on it in 24 hours.
Correct.
Question for you. The average salary for someone, a millennial, like you're considered a millennial,
I think so.
Alan, yeah?
Yeah, I'm in the cutoff.
So if as a millennial, you're working, I mean, you just graduated college and you're looking for a job, what's the average salary in Canada?
You have to look at take-home pay versus actual salary. Average salary starts at around $45,000 for someone coming out of college.
Sure.
That doesn't put you in the highest tax bracket, but your take home is somewhere around $29,000. Just to put that into context. And that's a great segue into something that I really want to go back to. On a $3 million acquisition in Toronto for a single home, which is not an unheard of amount or number, I put in the calculation of what the land transfer tax on that acquisition would be. You got any guesses? What it would be? $3 million acquisition. What would it be in Florida?
Yeah, probably about 10 grand.
Land transfer tax, $122,950.
To transfer the
Land
title?
transfer tax.
Land-
It's a
And you pay it
tiered system.
every time you transfer a property.
Right. So think about that. On top of your acquisition for a $3 million
I'm going to
purchase,
find out what the transfer tax is in Florida.
I was doing it in the calculation of 4%,
Question for you as well.
but that's all in closing costs, right?
Does that tax apply every time you have to refi every 3 years?
No, it does
Okay,
not.
because we
Every
pay transfer
time you
tax
sell a
every
house.
refi, even if it's to the same entity. I was just curious if Canada works the same way.
No, it doesn't. But you're refining your mortgage in Canada on a 25-year. Let's say you've locked 5 times. You're
Totally.
doing it 5 times.
Right, and I'm glad Meyer brought up adjustable rates because in reality, it sounds like in Canada you're always in an adjustable rate mortgage.
Yes.
That's just what you're in.
In Florida, that $3 million would be $21,000. It's 70 cents per $100.
$50,000 land transfer tax in the city of
Now, who pays that?
the buyer. There's no such thing as seller concessions. It does not incorporate in Canada. There's no seller concessions that the seller can offer. There's none of these negotiating pieces like you have here.
No, it's
So when you start to unpack this, and Irena's having conversations with clients, and then you really explain to them what the dollar for dollar implication is and the value of your dollar, how much more you can stretch it, it's not even the same ballpark. It's such an easy
an
sell.
investment property doesn't matter either, right?
No,
So if-
investment property is even worse. It's even worse because it
It's
could be
worse.
it could be deemed a business purpose loan. It could be a commercial loan. If you're buying residential properties, you can still get a conventional mortgage. But if you're looking at multi-res and
Or just
commercial,
straight single family as an investment, they would have to pay.
there's
on a
no
$3 million.
investments. You can't buy it. Everything is upside down. You know what you're trying to get at.
And
It
it
doesn't
doesn't make-
exist. Anybody who bought in Canada bought for capital appreciation.
Yes,
You
it's
speculated
just
that
for
it's
the
going to cost
appreciation of
more.
the property. Yes, that's 100% true. And also right now, even if you buy a house, let's say for $1 million for an investment purposes, your mortgage payment, monthly property tax is more than what the rent is. Now, this is what actually happens. The tenants here decide not to pay anymore. They lost their job, they're not paying. In order for you to remove those tenants from those investment properties, it can take you 2 years. So you are now basically paying for 2 years for those tenants living in your home until you decide to move them out. And it's the landlord board.
I've got
What is
dozens.
amazing in Florida, the sheriff will remove it within 45 days. You don't
Right.
pay your rent, you're gone.
On top of that, I have seen this with my own eyes because we used to work with a lot of the equivalent of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the insurance, right? And I've seen landlords just walk away from their house because they couldn't evict a tenant. There's a tenancy board in Toronto, and it's so skewed towards the tenant that if you're 6 months in arrears, you finally got a hearing and you go in front of the board and you explain your case, your the tenant will explain their case. And let's say they put $100 towards that rent, it'll reset the clock.
You know, here in the U.S., it's called deed in lieu of foreclosure, where you give your deed and the keys, and you said, take the house. I'd rather not deal with the foreclosure because people aren't paying. That was very common in 2008 when it was happening. People were just walking away.
So you wouldn't be on the hook for the remaining principal?
Depends. Some people would say, okay, we'll forgive. Other people say, no, you're liable for the thing.
You're still on the hook for that mortgage, right? And declare bankruptcy, which has all those other.
So what happens if you're underwater?
Okay, here's a great scenario. The pre-construction market was hot for so long in Canada. You got people that bought condos now, put in down payment, and executed on a contract for a price. We'll use a real live scenario: $600,000 condo in downtown Toronto. Okay, they paid 20% in, which is always the builder requirements, usually spaced out to a year and a half. Now you're in for that $500,000 condo. You got 20% in, so $100,000 of your own money. Closing time is coming up. It usually takes 5 to 6 years to put these buildings up. That property is probably worth today maybe 400 if you're lucky. Okay, and the cash.
I had a client like that. I had a full situation that right now she's in litigation.
So can you explain what's actually happening? Because I could tell you. I mean,
yes, it was a situation. She came to me a few months ago and she's like, Irina, I don't know what to do. I'm like, what's the problem? She's like, I purchased from Tridel, one of the buildings in downtown. She purchased it. It was a ridiculous amount of money. It was 1+1 for close to $750,000. She put the 20% down, and now the appraisal came at $550,000. So she's like, I do not have $200,000 from where to put towards the closing of that property. Also, the tenants that for that rental will be around $2,500 a month. She's like, I also need to pay additional close to $3,000 a month to carry this unit. I told the builder I'm leaving, and I left the deposit, and now the builder is suing her for the remaining amount.
And the builder
So
will
it's
win.
not just
how is that possible? You didn't close.
No.
You're required to.
No, so
in Canada, you have to close no matter what.
So here's what happens in this scenario. And her exact scenario I've now seen multiple times over, and it's happening more and more because I was so involved in that space. Personally, I'm taking a hit on the exact same scenario she's talking about. If you walk away from that deal, you can't close. So you actually didn't close on that property. So, you
can close or
you cannot close.
Yeah.
So there's two scenarios in this. Let's say you did close, you found a lender, you're going to pay for the premium and the rate. You're going to be hugely upside down, and you're going to have to then sell it in the free market and take a hit. That's actually the best option. The second best option is the one that Irina just described, where if you walk away from that deal, say, I'm leaving my keys, take my deposit, we're done. The developer will take that unit back in stock, sell it for whatever price they want to. Supposedly it's got to be on the free market. We'll sell it for, let's say, that $700,000 unit, market it, and end up selling it for $400,000. They're still going to stay whole because they're going to sue you and win for that $300,000 delta, which you will lose.
Correct.
So you're on the hook
That's
for the
crazy.
spread.
In the United States, not like that. You can walk away and that's it.
But what I'm trying to explain to you and why we're having this podcast and the messaging is not out there. First of all, when you look at another place in the United States, Florida being number one where everybody's going, aren't the loopholes, the judgments against you, the tenancy laws, and the access to capital that you don't have in Canada? And now you mix that in with the landscape being so bad and so froth with people upside down that they have to look for better options. And do they exist? Absolutely. And this entire segment, this entire business line, this podcast, the relationship is we're pounding the pavement and we're beating the table going, guys, there are solutions for you. There are options. There are much better options, not only for the fact that the lifestyle has changed. People are upset. People are down. They don't see any hope. It's cold and there's no future.
Does Canada have limitations on how much money you bring across the border? Like South America, certain countries, you can't take certain money out. Like Argentina is very strict on how much money you take out. Colombia, too. You can take whatever you
Yes,
want
so right
out.
now there's a new tax. It's called an exit tax. So now when you take money out of Canada to the United States, you need to pay taxes on that as well. So Canada is taxing you from all
How much is
angles.
the exit tax?
So there's a couple of forms of exit tax. One that's being toyed with that hasn't happened. That's called a departure tax. They haven't initiated this, but they're saying you'd have to pay $25,000 per head when you want to leave. So I have a family of 5, right? So on top of that, I need to pay $125,000 for them to leave. Then you have your exit tax. Depending on the number of assets and what kind of businesses you run in Canada, when you do your formal departure, the Canadian government will take a future value of present cash flows and say, you're going to make this, and this is what we value your assets to be now. So you have to pay all of those taxes, capital gains, income up front to depart.
Okay, so
From your
let's just say-
RRSP,
that's
RESPs.
great. If they say I'm not leaving, I'm just investing my money in the U.S.,
There's no tax implications.
so they can take that money.
They can take as much money as they want out. By the way, it's been in the ether for many years, but now it's starting to formalize with the new government. They're trying to put in something called an equity tax. So if you bought a house for $1 million, it's now worth 2. They want to tax the equity in your home, whether you use it or not.
So
Correct.
now, what happens if you tell them you're going on vacation? You've sold your assets, you paid all the tax, and you just don't go back.
So
As long as you file taxes yearly here, who would want to do that?
if you're doing it properly, there is a cutoff point, and you're no longer paying taxes in Canada. But they're going to get their pound in flesh before you leave. You can't find a gray area where you play both because you get caught in the crossfire in both
So
jurisdictions.
how do
they're gonna tax.
people afford to leave Canada if it costs them $25,000 a head to leave?
The question to ask is how can they afford to stay?
Or in Canada?
Right?
That's the problem.
And the truth is, as it stands today, young people, entrepreneurs, there's a lot of sentiment against Trump today because he inserted himself in the Canadian election and had a lot of sway in the way it led. I don't care which direction you are as a listener, but what I'm saying is that I think it was a brilliant move on behalf of Trump for the United States because you're going to see an influx of capital leaving Canada, and you're also going to see something that's intangible, and that's the brain drain. And it's the type of people that
For
are moving
US,
out.
he was very strategic about why he wanted liberals to win.
What are you hearing on the ground from Canadians?
To be honest with you, I'm in Ontario, so there's a lot of other people that voted, but just from us, and I'm on the road all the time, I have not seen even one sign that was the liberals. Because everybody have those lawn signs who they support. Conservative was everywhere. It was I think the highest voting that ever happened in Canada. Me personally, I have never voted. I've been in Canada for 20 years. It was the first time that I went to vote because I realized how important it's for the economy of Canada and for our safety. Canada became very unsafe. We didn't even touch that aspect about schools and children and families.
Speak to that, please. It's hard when I just say it.
So I will discuss only my personal experience because I'm sure everybody have their own. I still feel young. I'm 38. I'm a mother of 2 children. I still want to have a life beside, working. There is no life. I am fearful to go downtown. We do not go downtown. I do not feel safe walking in downtown. There is always protests. There's so much crime right now that we're literally stuck inside our homes because everywhere you go, something happens. Yesterday in our community, the whole plaza was closed with SWATs. Another bank was robbed. And we're not talking about once a year. We're talking about normal prestige areas that it's happening monthly.
That's crazy.
Jewelry stores every single month getting hit. You walk outside, you see SWATs running around, you're running inside your home. To go to a nightclub or even to a bar, as a female, I do not feel safe. I will not go.
I speak from my family still there. And this is a really interesting approach because she's not an old woman. She wants to go out, have fun, just like a normal, go to a restaurant. The downtown core in Canada was amongst the most safest places you can ever go. You never felt unsafe. I went to school there. I worked there. I used to go there often for restaurants and stuff. I've heard this repeatedly. We don't cross south of Eglinton anymore. It's Midtown, and then you get into downtown, and you just don't
You're
go
done.
there anymore. It's a no-go zone.
Amount of homeless people, the tents are everywhere, everywhere. Now they're also building a lot of shelter homes next to residential properties, which tanking the real estate prices as well.
That was
There's
happening in
shelters
Los
everywhere.
Angeles too.
So you guys are from California. I mean, some of this stuff could resonate. I mean, you just flew in the other day. We're still trying to clean the Newsom off of him a little bit. Was she saying, does it have any parallels to California?
I mean, it depends who you ask. Personally, no. Find it ironic because if you look up crime statistics in Canada and the US, I'd wager the US is statistically much less safe. But it's the feeling you get because it's how you feel in an area, in a place. I know that Meyer, specifically at our last office, we were 2 doors down from a jewelry store that got robbed in broad daylight. Crime happens. But where I live in my neighborhood, which is an arguably less prestige area, I've not seen an act of crime in 5 years. I have a survey called me every year from the U.S. Census Bureau asking about police, crime, how safe I feel. And every year I tell them, I've never seen a single bad thing happen. No police activity. No one's been robbed. No one on my street's been robbed. I know of situations where a jewelry store was broken into in broad daylight in a great area. So I really think it's a perspective and how you live your life, how you perceive the environment.
So to preface what you're saying, and I think that that's great. And I think normal life, this isn't a doomsday podcast. The locations that she's talking about were places where this stuff never happens.
Yeah.
Now it's gone to a monthly occurrence.
I just don't think you can say that and then say, I'd love to move to Miami for the safe nightlife. The irony is palpable there. And I don't think that that's as big of a factor as the fact that you couldn't possibly buy.
Okay, so safety, there's an argument to be made
Can I
back.
add the factor of a feeling? Because I
Yes.
fly to Florida monthly.
Yes.
I am there monthly. I have no problem. I understand that everybody carrying a weapon, that there are things that happening. But when I take an Uber by myself and I'm meeting my friends at downtown Miami, I do not feel that me, and again, I will also add the religion aspect. As a Jewish woman,
Yeah.
I am safe. I can comfortably wear my high on my neck. I am comfortable to walk around. There is police everywhere, and I know that the police is actually protecting you. Here, even to reach the police, by the time they will call, that's it. You're done. Like nobody is rushing, and I never know if they will actually take my side or the person that is trying to create the chaos in that situation.
Right.
Okay, so you're seeing a commonality in how people feel for all the factors we just discussed. Now you're seeing a lot more people saying, we want to move, right? You
Yes.
yourself are doing that, okay? You see opportunity here. What is it that you're telling people to do?
So people are approaching me mainly. I don't think that I am trying to convince anybody to leave Canada or to move to Florida. The decision was personally me because I want a better future for my children. I do not think that, first of all, the education system here, and I see it based on my friends. Most of my friends already moved to Florida. I see what the children are learning in school comparing to what we have here. Second, the lifestyle, the weather, all of that also affecting my mental health and my children's mental health and the safety. But people are approaching me and asking me how we can move. You need to work like crazy here. And if you will allow me 1 minute, I want to share something that I think it's important for the viewers to understand prices wise. Because when we say it's expensive, people don't understand what we mean. So let's say a regular in a very plain area, not a nice community, a house that bought 1 million. You put $200,000 down with a mortgage rate of around 4%. You need $235,000 to close, so 35 in closing fees, plus your monthly payments will be $5,500. That's without property tax and without utilities. So we're looking close to $7,000 just in order for you to afford a very plain home. Plus, let's take schools, curriculums, children, food. You're already at 10, 11. In Canada, to make clean $10,000, $11,000, you are considered already on the wealthier side of the population, which means that you're generating as a household 200 plus thousand net, which is 400,000 gross What positions?
It's actually
How many
even
people
higher than that.
generate that income?
So-
Even higher.
so
Do they qualify you on your gross income or the net income?
net.
They qualify you on the
Net.
net?
Yeah, what you supply to the lender is your notice of assessment. So that
sir.
notice of assessment will have your top line, your expenses, and your net. The calculation starts on the net. And then from that net, they'll take 43%. So if you're in her scenario, you make $10,000 net, right away, 57% is gone. They assume that you will need that money to live on a day-to-day basis. So only 43% is then allocated towards your household expenses, like carrying costs on the property, right? So you do the math on that, they can't afford this house.
And how much are property taxes typically?
Property taxes compared to especially Florida are significantly lower, okay? They're assessed
Lower.
in three.
Well, it's around $5,000 a year for $1 million home in an average area. That's reasonable.
But you pay those transfer taxes up front, right?
Oh,
so
yeah,
you're
yeah.
getting hit
All
for
the
them
time.
regardless.
Oh yeah. They're getting you one, but the property taxes are significantly higher. You know, they get you in one way, shape, or form. But there's no state income tax in Florida, but the property taxes are materially higher. What's the average calculation that you would say on a property tax? 1.5% of valuation, right? So you're probably looking at less than half of that in Canada for property taxes.
It's unaffordable there. That's for sure.
and
And
they're-
I'm doing
Also,
the
you
math.
got-
It's crazy.
The math just
Can I add something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Also, Canada is like the government pushing rentals. Guys, finish your basement. We'll give you $5,000-$10,000 to help you generate additional income from your house. So a lot of people actually went and did those home renovations. So I'm a contractor as well. To renovate the basement to make it compliant for rental for the government, it's around $100,000 because you need fire-rated walls, a separate entrance. It's a full thing. So first of all, you need to pay that amount. But also now you're paying taxes on the fact that your tenants are paying you a portion of your house. So now let's say 30% of your house it's rentable in order for you to pay for your monthly payments. When you sell your house, 30% is going towards capital gain. It means that half of your house was an investment.
So you're foregoing your primary tax exemption for trying to get a lift in cash flow, which based on the average basement rental income, maybe getting $1,500 a month with $100,000 investment.
Why would anyone buy there?
I have a question to go along with that. How are people affording to rent everything out so cheap? Because if everything's underwater and can't pay for itself, how are these people renting out houses at all?
It's the market conditions and the fact that you have rent
So
controls.
everyone's just taking a loss on everything?
Yes. Unless, again, we're talking also about generational wealth. People that bought properties 20 years ago or passing through the generations. We are talking about the new generation, kids that are now going to finish high school or want to step into home ownership. Unless your parents actually have equity and passing you money, what are the chances for a young family that makes around 150, which is very nice income jointly, to save another $200,000 or $300,000 in order to buy a house? It's going to take them 20 years.
This is the thing that
That's
people
the
aren't
problem.
talking about, right? But even with the high tax environment, Canada was not in the same way because it was steady as she goes. You got cold, you went on vacation, you were allowed to earn, you pay taxes, it was safe, no problem. Everything is off the table. There isn't one thing. I've had this debate with anyone that is still there, and it's a hard stop because there isn't one thing that you can point to and say that isn't better in, for me, it's Florida, than there is in Canada. There isn't one measurable thing. You talked about education. I have little kids, and my kids went to a private school in Canada. Every kid I know that has come from Canada was behind when they entered school and had to do a lot of extra supplementary stuff in order to catch up.
Just did the math right now, Irina, on 150,000 gross at a 57% tax bracket leaves you 43%. That's 64,500 for the year. Divide that by 12 is 5,375 net money to
There you
you.
Mm-hmm.
That's net money to
So
you.
they will rent a one-bedroom condo for $2,500. You need to understand car insurance here is ridiculous because cars are being stolen so much. I pay $750 just for my car insurance, and I never had a ticket, an accident, or anything. It's just because I live in an area that cars are being stolen more often. So even
not
your
even
vehicle
normal.
lease.
This is the thing that
How,
you,
how, Here, if
57.
if you're making 53.75 net
So at that
here,
at that number, you're not in 57%. At that number, if that's household
You're at
income,
49.
yeah, you're about
whatever.
40 or
That's
40.
still
so
insane.
it's 75,000.
Right.
75,000.
You want me to make it even more fun? 13% sales tax on all goods and services. So you go to the grocery
Well,
store.
we have similar here.
No, you
5.
don't.
In certain states, yeah, it gets up to 20.
Florida's 7.
7.
Yeah, Florida's 7. Go on anyway.
California is what, 9?
Yeah, and it can
Guys,
get higher,
even
and it
how much
depends
you
on.
pay cell phone bills, internet and cell phone.
Listen, the message here is everyone should buy in the States.
That's
and,
it.
and
That's where we're spending our days talking. Irina and I talk now every couple of days because you have people that they don't care about the acquisition costs of the real estate. We've now got that covered. They know they can qualify, bring us 25, 30%. Bob's your uncle. We got you taken care of. They're asking all the things that are really their driver. And you hear most common 2 things that I hear: a future for my kids and a quality of life. The quality of life piece is what's missing. If you asked pre-COVID any Canadian or even American where they think the quality of life was higher, it would be unequivocally skewed towards Canada. I would then second to say that was accurate and correct, regardless of all the expenses. In life, you look for value. And when you're paying for something and you're okay with what you're getting for that payment, i.e. being taxes in this scenario, you are very much okay with it because you can earn and you can grow, and it was safe, and you saw forward momentum, and there was potential, and all these wonderful things. All of those things that you've taken off the table, but the price remained the same. Where's the value?
Can I ask when you have these conversations with Canadians, what are the arguments against? Because I mean, you're selling me, right? Like I'm moving out of Canada, but what does someone say to you like, oh, but?
Well, I want to hear Irina's answer to that, and I'll give you mine.
I have those buts because I think that since me and Ronan basically decided that we will tackle this as a team from the financing and real estate aspect, my phone is exploding. I'm on the phone daily with people looking to move. It doesn't come to the fact that we don't have money to buy property. It's about how do we get a green card? What is my option to get papers? How can I work in the States? This is where we refer them to an immigration lawyer. I am not a lawyer. I don't know their story. I don't know their situation. How am I doing that?
But even before that, there's a process and a timeline to immigrate. These people that have money should invest now before they do anything. Because
you know what I hear?
There's
I made a mistake. When I left, people thought I was a lunatic, and they're all saying we should have done it then.
Look, Irina, the last 22 months in a row, house prices throughout the nation have gone up. Last month, they were 4%. So anyone who buys and it takes them 2 years to get a green card, at the very least, they have an asset that's appreciating, that they're collecting rental income on. At the same time, they're building something for their future. That's the message that I would be putting out.
I think something happened in the past year or with the government. I also think people were waiting to see about the elections, if there will be a change in U.S. election, if Trump going to win and what's going to happen here. The problem is it's not a problem. A lot of people actually have vacations home in Florida. Florida is very lucrative. People go there for the winter. It's known that Canadians are leaving the winter to Florida. The problem is they don't want to leave just for the winter. They want to permanently relocate there. They want to sell everything here. They want to liquidate because also, again, the conversion is very high from the Canadian to US. We lose a lot of money. They just don't want to stay here anymore. They don't see a point even to stay here in the summertime.
We're feeling this on a day-to-day basis. People think of the Canadian banking system as their only access to capital. What they don't realize is that they can refinance these assets they've had for a long time and use that as a source of down payment, and then they could scale their business. But I want to go back to a point like the counterbalance, the pros and cons.
Let's do it.
Okay.
And then we'll wrap up from here.
All right. In Canada, you get sick, you walk into a hospital, you don't get a bill, you get treated, and it is what it is. That has deteriorated so much because you have a lot of new people that are not contributing via taxes to the same healthcare structure that everybody has. And the hybrid model that the States kind of has now with Obamacare is a much better option. However, you do have to carve out a portion of your budget and expenses towards healthcare. And when people are moving down, at first, they don't have access to the same quality or health insurance that an American would. So that's one of the downfalls.
Yeah.
The other most common one, especially when people are talking about the most common states of people moving to, Florida or Texas and Arizona, guns. Canadians have extremely rigid, difficult restrictions to firearms acquisition. Handguns are restricted. They're banned. They don't exist unless you're a police officer or you're a criminal. You don't have it.
If you're a criminal, then you can get it.
Because criminals don't care. And then they keep taking thousands of guns, specifically long guns, off the table. Canadians have this thing because you hear a lot of horrible stories in the United States about mass shootings in schools and malls and stuff like that. That was also a big thing for us thinking about that because the spin is so anti-gun. When you're here, 1 in 10 people, at least when you walk into a restaurant, is carrying, right?
Yeah.
When you figure out and live the life of understanding that I would rather be in a spot that I know somebody is armed because everybody else could be armed and they can handle it, as opposed to having a criminal come into my house. The other thing to add to that is the stand your ground rule. So if somebody walks into your property in Florida, I think is it the same in California?
No, but in Texas and the other, I think Arizona as well, they have stand your ground.
So you can put a hot one in them and you'll get a medal.
At least you won't go to jail.
Right.
No, in Florida, they tell you shoot, and then the sheriff says
Right.
it.
Yeah.
Shoot, and then we'll figure it out later.
In your property, I'm sure there will be an investigation, but if someone approaches your home with nefarious activities, especially if they're armed, you can shoot. I know multiple people that have been robbed at gunpoint in their house and they can't do a thing. You can't even fight back. So the saying now goes, better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6. So there's pros and cons to both. Prior to all of this nonsense, Canada was a much safer place. I don't agree with that statement at all, but there's no perfect way of doing it. If we lived in a world without any guns and nobody had any guns, I'm very much okay with that. And I would prefer that.
Well, if I could jump into Myers' point, when you say things like all these reasons make you want to leave or move to the US, we had a client last week who we did a purchase as an investment for him. Years later, he gets the green card, November of last year. And he's like, all right, I can finally move, sells that investment property, buys a new house in Florida, and he's here now.
Sold in Texas. He bought in Texas, sold
As
in
an
Texas,
investment.
and bought in North Carolina.
Yeah, so buying that property here, he didn't even need to refi it. He could just sell, buy where he really wanted to live, and then he's here in the U.S. all of a sudden.
So where are you in the process right now of moving?
For me, thankfully, it's not that complicated because I work for a brokerage that also works in Florida. I am being sponsored by them. So I will be on an E2 visa, which gives me the right to work in Canada and in Florida. And then I will be converting it probably to a business. That will be the next step, the thinking how to get my green card. It's going to take me approximately 3 months. I'm going to start the process next month because in Florida, the school system starts in August, in Canada in September. Just want to make sure that me and my children have a smooth transition. I will still be working in Canada. I don't see a reason why I should close my operations here. I have a team in Canada and we are specializing in cross-border. This is our niche. And the more people we can help in Canada in the real estate or transition to Florida, it will be great. We're
So
here
if somebody-
basically to help.
If needs to reach you, where would they find you?
They can find me on social media. They can call me. They can message me. My number is everywhere. So I don't think that I'm that difficult to find.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
the
guys.
lessons.
Nothing can stop me. I'm all the way up. All the way up.